Good morning. Welcome inside our studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is 5 Clubs on Golf Channel, and you can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. I am Gary Williams, and our show is presented by Century Insurance, right by you. And of course, our 3 North Carolina-based companies who've been with us since the beginning: Pinehurst Resort, Peter Millar, and Golf Pride, 3 of the leaders in their categories. Whatever you need from those 3 companies, they will provide it to you. Again, we can't do it without them. We start with the congratulations. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles, to their fans. I say that as if I really mean it, and I kind of do, but growing up a Giant fan, not easy to stomach that, but they were fantastic. Philly is one of the great cities for golf, not only in this country, but anywhere in the world. So congratulations to the Eagles as they celebrate a dominant victory last night in New Orleans in the Super Bowl. Speaking of dominant, there was a lot of golf that was played around the world. We're going to get to all of it over the course of the hour. I'm also going to be joined by Brendan Porath, who's the head of content for Friday Golf, Drew Stoltz from the Subpar podcast, and also the co-host of Gravy and the Sleeves on the PGA Tour Radio Network. The fact that he's getting up on a Monday morning out there in Scottsdale, Arizona, after the week that he's had, what a good friend. Looking forward to conversations with both of them. But dominance was also seen yesterday at the WM Phoenix Open as we take a look at the leaderboard of what happened on the PGA Tour. Thomas Detry by 7. And there's an interesting little nugget that I will get to about first-time winners doing things dominant over the last 4 years. Michael Kim, great result for him. Daniel Berger coming back from the injury. This is a guy who represented the United States on a Ryder Cup team. Speaking of which, coming back from an injury, Jordan Spieth. He dazzled, was great. Tee to green in particular, the way that he hit his irons. Christian Bezuidenhout also at 16 under par. Justin Thomas holes out from the fairway on 18 to finish in a tie for 6 with Will Chandler, who's a great story, a Monday qualifier. The final Monday qualifier for the Phoenix Open, they've had one since 1948, played the final round with Scottie Scheffler, beat him by 6, shot 66, gets him into Mexico. Congratulations to him on a hell of a week. Robert McIntyre at 15 under. Maverick McNeely makes the cut on the number, shoots 63 on Saturday. He finishes in a tie for 9th along with Taylor Moore, who has been in this studio for a long-form 5 Clubs conversation. Good week for him as well. Maverick McNeely is a perfect example when you look back at the end of the year as to why guys make the Tour Championship. It's because they make the cut on the number by making 2 birdies at the end of a Friday round, just go completely unhinged on a Saturday, and then finish in the top 10. That is a great story. But the story is at the top of the leaderboard, and it's Thomas Detry. Justin Ray, who can provide you with more nuggets than anybody when it comes to covering all of professional golf, had this little nugget about first-time winners. This is the 4th straight year that we have had a first-time winner on the PGA Tour that has won by 6 or more. If that doesn't amplify how many people are capable not only of winning, but when they're right, to not just win, but run away. And Thomas Detry reminds me of a great scene in a movie that was shunned by the Academy, Days of Thunder. Oh, you remember it with Tom Cruise and Robert Duvall. Remember he got in the accident and he was afraid to just put the pedal down at the end of the film because it's like, gosh, I don't know if I can trust myself. And it's not like Thomas Detry was in some 10-car pileup somewhere along the way building up scar tissue, but he has been in the position that he was in on a handful of occasions throughout his career, more so on the DP World Tour than on the PGA Tour. So you're going, okay, when is he going to have his moment where it's going to become, where he is going to be hanging on for dear life? It never happened. So, like Cole Trickle, played by Tom Cruise, he blew through his own vortex of uncertainty, whatever that was, because nobody ever doubted Thomas Detry's ability to do this at the highest level. But the fact that he won and the manner in which he won with the leaderboard that included, for a period, the number 1 player in the world, Scottie Scheffler, just goes to show you how many guys are capable. And he did it in a way that when you do what he did it, do it the way that he did it, meaning he was better than anybody in terms of his approach play, strokes gained approach, his iron play, and he is 1 or 2 in putting. That's what happens, a dominant performance, not to mention hitting more greens than anybody in regulation. And so for Thomas Detry at 32 years of age, he wins for the first time. And it also continues an early season trend of Europeans, not just here on the PGA Tour, but also on the DP World Tour with Tyrrell Hatton this past week, and also on Live Golf. And we'll get to Live Golf a little bit later on, just touching on it with Adrian Meronk. The Europeans, and I sat here last week with Johnson Wagner and Brendan DeYoung, and I posed the question, is Europe as deep as the United States when it comes to 1 through 12? And I think depth is reflected in a couple things. One, obviously, you got to have 9, 10, 11 guys who you think are the match of your opponent. But I also think pressure neutralizes an advantage. And the United States has an immense amount of pressure on them at Bethpage. So I think that's another reason why that Europe should feel emboldened, and Luke Donald should be smiling right now. I get it. It's not even the middle of February. But this is somebody who nobody denied had the ability to be among the better players in the world, and now he's won. We'll see what it does from here. Speaking of one of the better players in the world, and for people who might have been, I don't know, maybe not as invested in golf 10 years ago, or maybe they were 15 and hadn't found golf yet, and maybe they found it through YouTube or other digital offerings when it comes to the game of golf, Jordan Spieth was an it kid. He was an it guy. When he burst onto the scene at 16, playing in his hometown event, the Byron Nelson, and finished in the top 25, he went, wow, what a great story. And then he did it again. And then he went off to the University of Texas, and in one season was part of a team that won a national championship, beating Alabama at Riviera in dramatic fashion. And then he was off to professional golf with no status anywhere. And by July, he'd won at 19 years of age, kissing the flagstick at the John Deere and winning in a playoff over Zach Johnson and David Hearn. And he was the golden child, as Colt Knost declared him. And it seemed like he was kind of a combination of Camelot meeting MacGyver, where everything seemed charmed, but in order for him to get to the finish line, he had to do it with his hair on fire. And he became the #1 player in the world. And I would argue his 2015 season was one of the best seasons. I would argue that it was, if not the second, it's one of the 2 or 3 best seasons this century. Tiger 2000's won. And if you look at some of Tiger's other great seasons, 2005, he won 2 majors and also finished 2nd and 4th in the other 2. So did Spieth. He went 1-1-4-2 that year in the majors, and he won the first 2 and missed the playoff at the Open by a shot at the Old Course, and then pushed Jason Day all the way to the finish line. He was captivating. He was lean forward, hold on, he's 2 back. We will start the barbecue as soon as this round is over. And so he rekindled some of that in his second start. So if Jordan Spieth can even be a reasonable facsimile of what he was formerly, it makes the PGA Tour more interesting, it makes the product more valuable, and he reemerges potentially as one of the most valuable assets in golf. To see him make that routine 2-putt par on 11, which somebody coined on social media yesterday instantaneously, which is another reason why Jordan Spieth is so interesting, is that when you're watching him, I'm also following along in my timeline the instantaneous real-time reaction of people who watch golf and cover golf in terms of what he was doing. He putted from a bush for his 2nd on 11, hit his 3rd to 12 feet, and melted in the par putt. Just a routine 4 2-putt par for Spieth. Somebody who has very interesting things to say about him is Brendan Porath, who is the head of content for Friday Golf. He and his partner, more his partner, have declared that Jordan Spieth, over the last couple years, had become just a guy. And I get it in terms of the results. Now, what say you about what he might become again? We'll talk about that and a whole lot more. We're just getting started on this Monday. It's great to have you with us. It is 5 Clubs on Golf Channel, and you can also listen if you're leaving the house right now on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. We're back right after this. We are back. It is 5 Clubs on Golf Channel. You can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. Certainly very proud to be aligned with Century Insurance, right by you. They invest in the great things in the game of golf. We're awfully proud that they've invested in what we're doing here. Joining me now, the head of content for Friday Golf. If you are not following them, I wonder if you're invested in golf, because they cover it exceptionally well from every possible angle. And I'm speaking of Brendan Porath. Good morning, my friend. How you doing?
Good morning, Gary. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Very good. Let's start with Thomas Detry. Look, when you run away in any event, I don't care where on the PGA Tour, I don't care if it's your 10th, your 20th, in this case, his first, this doesn't happen often. Give me a broad takeaway of him winning, the manner in which he won, and then any other things you want to add to the wrinkles of a Thomas Detry W in the desert.
Well, I think what it reinforces is that this comes at different speeds for different players. He is an elite professional golfer. He hasn't won. He's 32 years old now. He finishes with 4 straight birdies, maybe the greatest shot we've ever seen on 16. You know, it's known more for the party atmosphere rather than the hole, but I haven't seen a shot like that from a contender at the end, like that one that he stopped on top of the table there for really to seal the deal and make it academic all the way in. But, you know, it comes at different speeds. We saw Jordan Spieth who came really quickly right? And now he's trying to figure it out as he gets into his 30s. But Thomas Detry has all the quote-unquote measurables, right? The statistical profile of someone who should win on the PGA Tour and had been in the hunt, in the fire many times over. And I don't know that it's a floodgates. I think what it reinforces more than anything is how hard it is to win on the PGA Tour, because if it takes Thomas Detry until he's 32 to do it, a talent like that who put that all together and put that show on Sunday, it just reinforces how hard it is in this modern era to win on the PGA Tour, regardless of talent. And you know, it just comes at different speeds for different players.
No, you're right. And look, I think part of it for him was his own personal psychological mental vortex, which he's clearly broken through. And I'm with you. I really struggle with the floodgates thing. It's like, I think it can be applied, relatively speaking, on occasion, not launching him to a 3-win season. However, the other part of this to me, Brendan, is these European markers that are getting laid down all over the world. That's not lost on me. It cannot be lost on the United States Ryder Cup captain, let alone the European captain. This is another guy, like you said, he has the measurables. If he continues to do this, that's another potential asset of evaluation for Luke Donald, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. He's firmly in the running. I saw Fred Couples, who has an eye for talent, has been a captain around, is coming out of his shell to tweet last night about how impressed and how much in love he is with Thomas Detry. You know, Donald has so many options now. You know, we've got 6-7 months before we really get to it, you know, hitting the shots, so a lot can happen. But we walked out of Whistling Straits 4 years ago, just wondering, like, how the heck are they going to fill in this roster going forward? They're going to have these pillars and Rory and Rahm and probably Hovland, although he's become, you know, he'll be on the team most likely. But how are they going to fill out the roster? And here we are 4 years later, and it's a mix, right? They're going to have some young guys come out of nowhere, the 18 to 20-year-olds we didn't know about yet. And they've gotten that with the Twins, and they've gotten that with Ludwig Oberg. He's emerged. But now it's a lot of guys who've been on tour kind of solidifying themselves, right? Tyrrell Hatton is a bona fide top 10 player in the world. He won in Dubai.
Yep.
You got Shane Lowry, who has solidified himself really as a top 30-ish. I think he's top 20 right now, player in the year. Player in the world. Justin Rose continues to hang around. Sepp Straka has stepped forward. And now we have a guy like Thomas Detry winning. So it's a mix of young guys who came out of nowhere ascended as you might, and players who've really stepped up in their 30s, like a Straka, like a Lowry, and now Thomas Detry. So there are options from.
No, you're right. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about Whistling Straits, and it kind of reminds me of what we watched last night, how we immediately, if a team loses, as good as that team has been, we're going, God, they need wholesale changes. They got old. They look old. That team at Whistling Straits, I mean, in the collective, from Westwood to Poulter, to Stenson, to Casey. McDowell wasn't on the team, but Garcia, all of them. It was like they became ancient overnight, and now the infusion is there. You didn't even mention the Højgaards. You can add them to the mix as well. Now let's get to another guy. You mentioned Jordan Spieth. Jordan has been and will always be an interesting topic. You guys talk about him in I think, fun, interesting, non-disparaging ways. But your partner there, Andy Johnson, has actually branded it Just a Guy. I think you have hats that you're selling. You're probably doing very well with that. You know he's not just a guy, but his results have been reflective of somebody who's just a guy. What did this week possibly whet the appetite for everybody if this continues to some degree?
I do feel like I'm being called forward here to answer for the sins of my partner with the Just a Guy branding, but it was just a little fun. But he is 65th in the world. He's one behind Ben Griffin, but of course we know he is quote unquote one of those needle movers, right? We've heard that from network executives for years. Things spike when Jordan Spieth is in the mix, and you outlined his resume. One of the greatest seasons of the century. At the top of the program here. Well, yesterday's encouraging. It's Jordan Spieth has posted results that are very smoke and mirrors, and that's why we love Jordan Spieth, because he can do that smoke and mirrors result. Yesterday was not really one of those. He didn't drive it well. It was one of his worst driving days of the week. But his strokes gained approach numbers, which are critical, right? That we've seen him become, just a guy in terms of form,
right,
where he's kind of been slapping it around, and some of that's been injury with his wrist last year for sure, but really struggling. He's one of these players that was sort of ahead of this current generation of TrackMan golfers. He, of course, is a modern player, but he grew up playing golf, not playing TrackMan, right? And that is sort of changing, and he doesn't have the horsepower. He hits it fine. We sort of overplay that he doesn't hit it far, but he does not have some of the speed profile horsepower of the next generation that's come up behind him. And if he's not going to hit it well or straight, that really comes back to bite him. And what we saw yesterday were real strokes gain approach, a real kind of tee to green game throughout the week that is indicative of a player that can be sort of an elite Ryder Cup player, a top 15 player in the world again. So that certainly whets my appetite. And I think, forever, there's been this balance of, and we saw it a week ago with Pebble Beach, that the fan survey that the PGA Tour released.
Yes.
They want on-course personality. They want off-course personality. The style of play and results come after that, were the findings of the PGA Tour. And a lot of the pros were like, I grew up want to be a golfer. I don't care about being an entertainer. And that's the appropriate response and mindset. But on the other side, for the consumer, there is a little bit of both, right? I think excellence in and of itself is entertaining. Scotty Scheffler would get dinged for being, kind of monotonous at times. But I've always found him to be, watching him dismantle a golf course in the way he does is highly entertaining. Jordan Spieth sort of, when he's better or at his best, he fulfills all those things with the on-course banter, with the way he gets the ball in the hole. This is sort of an asset to the tour and what the fans, by their own survey, really want.
Yeah, if he had done it, like, to your point, if it was all smoke and mirrors and it was he hit half the greens, got up and down from everywhere, he did what he did when he was at his best, as much as, yes, he made what felt like 1,000 roadmaps of putts in 15, 16, and 17. He was among the best iron players in the world, not for a month, for more than 3 years. And that's what he was this past week. And I think the combination, Brendan, of him being so idiosyncratic, now he's got this pre-shot routine that I find almost disorienting. Like, wait, is he getting ready to hit it? Oh, no, he's not. And it's almost like, it seems like it's the same speed. Sure. I think for people who maybe not were as invested 10 years ago, I think he will captivate people again. The ones who were never went away. The ones who don't know better, I think he'll make them lean forward, don't you?
Absolutely. And sometimes the roller coaster that we talk about and the smoke and mirror stuff and the way he kind of can pull a birdie out of a hat or a par save out of a hat, mitigates how good he was and can be. I mean, we're talking about the number one player in the world here, not just some guy who we're not going to say he's savvy or anything like that, but we're talking about an elite talent who's won pretty much everything, right? Now, I know he's 60, he's dropped way down in the 70s in the world rankings, and it's been a few years since he's won. And I think that's where sort of some of the skepticism comes. But this is a player who's number one in the world and is only in his early 30s. So I think he has all the elite skills. It's just we get so obsessed with the horsepower nowadays that we and some of the smoke and mirrors of results that he did post, where he rolled in however many feet of putts,
right,
that we forget how actually good at golf. He's the number one player in the world kind of talent. And I think we need to remember that sometimes. And hopefully, with a little bit of help here, he can reclaim that because the tour will see a massive boost if he is a factor on these leaderboards like he was this weekend.
A couple weeks ago when I had you on, I asked you, when you start to assess assets on the PGA Tour, you started with Tiger, who's really not a tour player anymore, in the sense that he tries to play the four majors and he'll try to play his own event, which is this week. So here he is in his 49th year. He's played 14 majors since he won the Masters. He's missed the cut in half of them. You can add a couple of withdrawals. His best result was the U.S. Open 2 months after he won the Masters at Pebble Beach in 2019. So if this year is like the previous 5, how do you declare him anything other than a ceremonial golfer at the end of the year?
It's feels like such a pernicious term, right? And it feels unfair sometimes to say, but it's an honorific, right? It's an honorific, and in golf, you never really fully retire or go away. There's not this tearful press conference like you would, John Elway or Peyton Manning or something like that. So ceremonial golfer is this sort of phrase you kind of try to split the difference, right? And he's around, but is he really?
It's code for he can't contend. That's what it is. Code for he can't contend, he can't win. We know that.
Right. We're going back to the Genesis this week. 2 years ago, he's made 8 starts, a handful of WDs. He's made 3 cuts in 2 years. I'd say that's ceremonial at this point. When you're making 8 starts in 2 years and, you're WDing a handful of times, I think he's got to make more cuts than he misses in 5 starts, 6 starts.
Right.
It feels hard to kind of reverse the trend here. And of course, this year, I wouldn't say is a real benign set of major venues for him. Oakmont's a hard, big walk. The Masters, he's a big walk, but he knows how to get around there. Quail Hollow is a big course. Portrush is a rare links course with a fair amount of up and down and elevation change. Another big course. I don't think it sets up great for Tiger in a way that, Pinehurst maybe flatter and in a hot part of the year, a hot part of the country. It doesn't set up great, but I do think he needs to make 2-3 cuts out of his 5 starts. And is that a low bar for Tiger Woods? It feels like it. Maybe a top 20 result at the Masters would have you feeling like, all right, he's found some sort of happy medium here where he makes only 5-6 starts a year, but can kind of get in the mix when he's there. But it's hard when you have 0 competitive reps to just jump off the couch and go play. So to break out of this sort of ceremonial phase, it feels like he's got to make more cuts than he misses it and make a clean 5-6 starts.
Last thing, that this past week saw a release from the PGA Tour about a conversation the commissioner and Adam Scott had with the President of the United States. That was it. Right. So how are you guys trying to kind of pick through what is something that presents itself as news, but isn't really news?
That's a fair question. I think it's notable in and of itself when anyone from golf is going to the Oval Office or wherever they went, and who's ever in the office meeting with the President of the United States. We understand that golf has been in this sort of tumultuous place. It feels like there's an undercurrent of progress here, right? I think there's an undercurrent of optimism vis-a-vis the negotiations with the Saudi PIF, the deal being pushed through. It feels like there's progress and there's optimism among players involved, and hopefully Adam Scott and the commissioner. But yes, it wasn't really notable on its face, and I suppose they maybe just released that to get out ahead of it and kind of put their own stamp on it. But it was a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. There was really no, it's just words saying we went and met with them Tuesday and we're hopeful. When I got the release and it said in my email, the future statement on the future of pro golf, it's like, wow, this is a big one here. I clicked up, well, that's a big topic, and I opened it and it was just, 4 or 5 sentences, not saying a lot, but I understand it's notable and newsworthy in and of itself when you meet with the president.
As always, thank you for the time. Look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good day.
Thanks, Gary.
All right, there is Brendan Porath, the head of content for Friday Golf. When we come back, what did I see in the world of golf? We get to that on a Monday right after this. Welcome back in. It's 5 Clubs on Golf Channel. You can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network on Sirius XM. This segment is brought to you by Pinehurst. There's always a good reason and a good time to be at Pinehurst. Next week, I'm going to play the best new public golf course in America, as voted on Pinehurst number 10. Looking forward to that. And Pinehurst number 8, it's got new cottages. You can book them now. They're going to be available in May. Pinehurst, the cradle of American golf. Now, what did I see over the last week in golf? And that could be anything. Let me start with LIV, because LIV started their season in the Middle East. Look, the DP World Tour starts their season in the Middle East. They were just playing their event, the Qatar Masters. But LIV starts their fourth season, and they do it in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and they decide they're going to do it under the lights. And I have no reason, I have never gone on my way to disparage them or anything associated with them. It's what it is. But I will tell you that the concept of golf at night seems fun. It doesn't work. And when you have a golf course where nobody is there, and you have a condition of a golf course that is exposed as being kind of ordinary, and that's a shot by Adrian Meronk, who was your eventual winner, very good player. It's lame. It's grossly overrated. Doing things at night to entertain people around golf like they did last week out there in Arizona, I get that completely, but this is supposed to be the highest level of elite professional golf. And you have condensation, and the golf course plays softer than it does during the day. And here's the other thing about golf courses, why they're interesting. It is the rumples. It is the things that you see, the imperfections, the contour that comes with light. You only get that with light. You don't get that in the darkness. That was really, really lame. And maybe they'll do it again. But the fact is, it's not going to work because nobody's there. And I'm not going to even speak to the television audience, which again, look, people are watching in all different ways. I made a point of watching a fair amount of it, and I was totally underwhelmed by it. Now, meanwhile, a couple other things. Ricky Fowler, he's done the +4s. He's done pineapple motifs out in Maui. He goes with the full camo. And I don't know if he deliberately tried to hit that one shot into the bush where he literally disappeared before our very eyes because he was camouflage to his environment. Nobody can pull off more when it comes to attire, flair, swag, gear than Ricky. It didn't work. And he didn't even play the weekend. He WD'd before they even got to Saturday. It's the first thing that he's worn that I went, you know what? Boo Weekley is the only guy who can pull off the camo. One last thing about what I saw on Friday. And look, this was a very specific, very particular situation when it came to Luke Clanton, who I told you a couple of weeks ago reeks. If you look at him, he reeks of belief. And him being on the cut line was captivating on Friday late, and he's got a decorated pairing. He's playing alongside Nick Dunlap and Justin Thomas. And there he needs a couple of birdies at the end of his round on Friday to play the weekend, but more importantly, secure employment whenever he wants that time card to be punched on the PGA Tour. And he didn't make the birdie on the final hole. But all that did, one, because it's him, and I know you can't get that every week, but late on a Friday, happy hour, as they call it, which I used to indulge in, but I've retired from that game. I don't need the drink to be entertained by what that can be. And I hope all the networks are looking at that and going, that is what that window needs to be. And if it's dedicating more handheld cameras out there to guys who are hovering around the line, because we have less events that have cuts now than we used to, particularly in the best events, and those guys are already insulated when it comes to employment. But all the other events on the PGA Tour late on a Friday, yeah, follow who's ever going to be your 36-hole leader. Follow who's trying to just get to the weekend, like Maverick McNeely, who made 2 birdies, shot 63, and finished tied for 9th. Those are the stories that are the texture of men's professional golf. We're going to take a quick break. When we continue, he was already logged in before we started this segment. I lost every wager when it came to the Super Bowl. I lost another. I took the over on Drew Stoltz logging in before we asked him to. The co-host of Gravy in the Sleeves and the Subpar podcast joins me next right here on 5 Clubs. We are back on 5 Clubs on Golf Channel, and this segment is brought to you by Golf Pride. And I've made a point of telling you that the Align Max is available starting this week from Golf Pride. Harris English used this new grip. I've had them for a couple months. They're a game changer. They're unbelievable. All right, joining me now, this is somebody who I look forward to being with at Augusta National on the Sirius XM side. An elite. It's amazing he's an amateur again. Somebody who is part of one of the great radio shows and great podcasts when it comes to speaking to everybody who matters in the game of golf. And I'm speaking of Drew Stoltz from Gravy in the Sleeves on Sirius XM and the Subpar podcast with his partner Colt Knost. Up early, out there in the Valley of the Sun. You're a good man and a good friend. How are you?
Gary, I'd like you to know I would not do this for many people in the world. This early of a wake-up call the day after the Phoenix Open just ended. As you can tell by my voice, it's a long week, left it all on the field, but happy to be with you, man, and good to see you back on TV right where you belong.
Thank you, buddy. As somebody who not only lives there, look, the Thunderbirds are an organization you spend every day from starting today until the event week next year trying to do better, trying to make it better than it was the year before. And you know all of the conversation that everybody had about last year. Tell everybody, as somebody who's on the ground, involved on the tournament side with the tournament organizing committee, what worked so well in 2025?
Yeah, we changed a lot. And I think on television, I don't know how much you could notice on television. You see the venues, you see 16, you see 17, 18. It probably looks the same, right? But on the grounds, it was infinitely different. And I think this year went as well as this golf tournament could have possibly gone. We put a huge emphasis on taking in all the feedback from last year and making changes for the better. We were dealt a little bit of a bad hand with the weather, which led to all of it, but you got to be ready for stuff like that. So this year, just a handful of the changes we made. First, we cut the GA tickets roughly in half, which eliminates so much of the foot traffic. Also, Gary, like the issues when you run into the people, doing things to try to create a viral moment or whatever. Typically, those are people that are on the GA tickets. So we eliminated roughly half of those. We also took away the any day passes where historically you could buy a pass, Gary, for any day you wanted. Thursday through Sunday, you pick your day. If you wake up Thursday and the weather's no good, you say, okay, I'll go Friday. Well, we did that last year and the weather was awful Thursday and Friday. It wasn't great on Saturday, but people were like, well, all of us are coming on Saturday. So there was too many people. The grass wasn't usable. So we eliminated the one-day passes. That way we could know exactly how many people were going to be out there each day and what to expect. We increased security heavily throughout the property, namely in 16, 17. We also had walking security guards with the groups. If there was ever any issue, it was a zero tolerance policy. If a player said, hey, that guy's out of line, boom, you were out of there. And, over $2 million too. Went of our own money, of Thunderbird money, with no chance for gaining revenue from this money. We expanded the pinch points for foot traffic where things seem to get congested. Issues can happen. We created an elevated walkway all the way from the clubhouse to the practice area so the players never had to step foot on grass until they got out to the putting green. All those things combined. And our leadership, Chance Cosby, Matt Mooney, our tournament chairman this year, where they did an unbelievable job. I think it was a 10 across the board as far as we're concerned.
That is great to hear. You know this. You know, all these names, you throw them in the pot and it becomes whatever the stew is. Spieth is a special ingredient. And as somebody who's been around this a long time, explain to people what he does to an environment when he puts himself in the mix.
Yeah, this golf course, this golf tournament, I would say, Gary, is a little bit of a different animal. In terms of like the fan turnout, I would say we're probably as immune from like the quality of field,
yes,
and the driving interest as any event in the world, right? Probably more so. Excuse me. For instance, I think Tiger Woods may be the one guy that can move the needle in terms of like interest in people, but at the same time, it's like we have the maximum amount of people we can have on property anyways, right? So it doesn't draw more people, but I do think it draws more interest, and that crowd, you know, on the weekend especially is looking to go crazy. They're looking for a reason to go nuts. And when you can throw a guy like a Jordan Spieth in, who I think is one of the more likable guys on the PGA Tour, one of the biggest stars we've had in the game for a long, long time. And people are waiting for him to break out again and to win again. When he starts to put himself in the mix, starts to make some moves, you can just kind of feel the energy build on the property the same way that we've had, you know, in years past. Like maybe even more so than like a Scotty Scheffler, just in terms of like the fanfare, because everyone's so used to Scotty winning all the time, you know. So it was great. We love to have the big names at the top. We love to have the Cinderella stories at the top. You know, Nick Taylor wasn't a guy that was on the front of everybody's mind going into last year. You know, Thomas Detry, I didn't hear a whole lot of people picking him going into the week. So Jordan's effect is definitely real. The fans seem to gravitate towards him maybe more than anybody else out there. And it was good to just see him playing good golf too, so fresh off the surgery.
You walked this journey, for people who don't know, as somebody who went off, played high-level Division I golf, turned professional. For people who don't believe me, we're going to show you a little photograph, a guy who had the world by the tail, okay? And that guy right there, that guy was unbeatable in the state of Colorado. Now, look at him. Look at the belief in his eyes. The young Drew Stoltz. Now, let me ask you, as somebody who is now in your place, you see these young guys. I mentioned Luke Clinton, and there's Nick Dunlap. How much has changed in terms of these guys walking out there going, I'm not going to wait my turn here. I'm ready to do this now, as opposed to 15 years ago?
It's changed completely. I mean, the caliber of golfer, the average guy, the number 2 or 3 guy on the top 15 teams is so much higher, I believe, than when I was in school. I think I was kind of on the front end of the game changing and getting longer, getting more athletic, getting faster. But I can go back to my era, Gary, and name like the 3 or 4 or 5 guys that just hit it different distances off the tee than everybody else. I'm talking like J.B. Holmes, you know, Dustin Johnson, Jonathan Vegas. Anthony Kim was a special talent who didn't necessarily do it with length, with length, but he was special. But those guys that all hit it so far, all of them went on to win on the PGA Tour. You know, they went to have great careers. Nowadays, I mean, I was just down at the ASU facility the other day watching those guys hit it. And I was like, I mean, this is higher than these guys, these 5 that I'm watching have a higher ball speed than the PGA Tour average, you know? And these guys are sophomores, and there was a freshman. Like, the talent level is ridiculous, and you're starting to see it with guys like Luke Clanton, who will have his PGA Tour card here very shortly. We were hoping he would do it this week at the Phoenix Open. You know, Gordon Sargent coming out. I mean, they're ready to go. Like you said, there's no longer, I get my 7 exemptions, this will be a good way for me to get my feet wet. It's like, I get my 7 exemptions, I want to win, and I want to have my PGA Tour card after that. It's completely different, and it makes me more and more happy every day. I'm not having to add a scorecard up, Gary, to be out of there, because these kids are just too good.
You're a professional golf talker and one of the best. You're a good man and a good friend for getting up early on a Monday after the week you've just had. I'll see you soon enough. Thank you, buddy.
You got it, Gary. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
All right, there is Drew Stoltz. Gravy in the Sleeves, the Subpar podcast. We come back on 5 Clubs right after this. Welcome back into Five Clubs. This segment being brought to you by Peter Millar, a commitment to quality and style for more than 20 years. Everything I wear and have worn since 2011, from head to toe, is Peter Millar. They are the standard when it comes to anything you need, from work to the weekends. They have you covered at Peter Millar. I mentioned this earlier as far as what is happening early on in this season in terms of performance by European Tour players, because it is a Ryder Cup year. And it's the kind of conversation which distinguishes the event so much, is that the conversation carries itself all the way to the culmination of that particular week. And even though form is fickle, and we have no idea what these guys are going to look like in July, let alone late September out on Long Island, but it is interesting to note that at the start of the year, Tyrrell Hatton won on the DP World Tour in Dubai, and then Rory won at Pebble Beach, and Sepp Straka won the American Express, and Adrian Meronk won in Riyadh. There are guys who, and Thomas Detry is another one from Belgium, who just won as well. You can add all these other guys who've gotten off to good starts. Justin Rose, who's showing that he's got more tread left on the tires, and Robert McIntyre, who's already been on a European Ryder Cup team. They have 14 top 10s on the PGA Tour early on this season, and add to that winners in Straka and Rory and Detry. That is an early indication that they are coming for the United States. And the pressure on the United States at Bethpage is going to be immeasurable. Luke Donald made the choice to put the band back together. And even though some of the members of the horn section might be a little bit different, they can play. All right, we're going to continue here, come back with some final thoughts, get you set up for a Tuesday edition of Five Clubs, not only right here on Golf Channel, but you can also listen on the PGA Tour Radio Network. We're back with you right after this. All right, a couple minutes left here on this Monday. Rex and Ryan will follow. Rex Hargard, Ryan Lavner, their program on a Monday morning. Those two elite writers will chop it up for the next hour right here on Golf Channel. Tomorrow, the host of The Starter, Taylor Zarzour, is going to join me. The Starter on SiriusXM's PGA Tour Radio. He'll be with me the last half hour of the program to talk about Tiger talking. And when he talks, it's usually noteworthy, even though for many, many years you're trying to say, what exactly did he say and how much did he share? His place is different. It's a Tiger week. It's a very different week. And it's kind of got a somber tone because of the event having to be displaced from Riviera to Torrey Pines because of the horrific fires in the greater Southern California area around Los Angeles County. I did want to mention Halimi No won on the LPGA. She gets her first win. She felt some pressure, I know, including from Nelly Korda, but she gets her first LPGA win in the Founders Cup. And Hao Tung Lee wins the DP World Tour's Qatar Masters. Hao Tung Lee is always been interesting. And if he becomes interesting again because he's winning, and that means he's on camera, there's a value to him for sure. One last thing I want to mention. I was lucky enough to be down in Palm Beach County and stopped by Seminole Golf Club, where I was lucky enough to work before I entered into the broadcast field and saw Matt Cahill, the head golf professional. There is nothing like being on that property, and I wouldn't be where I am today without those years of experience being around that place. For all of us here on Five Clubs, have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.